Thank you to Seroptimus for sponsoring this video.
Hi there, welcome to Headwaters Science Institute's Lunch with a Scientist. Join us as we talk with working scientists from all over the world as we explore what science research in their career actually looks like. We will host a new scientist every other week and allow them to present their research and follow that up with an open-ended question and answer session. We hope exposure to these professionals will allow students to not only see what type of research is possible, but also see what kinds of careers are accessible, and hopefully we'll have a little bit of fun along the way. My name is Dan Edel. I am the Communications Director at Headwaters Science Institute, and I am happy that you are joining us on our continued celebration of science on Big Day of Giving. We've had some great chats so far already today. If you missed it, our program director, Jen Cotton, chatted with Eliza Montgomery, who is a NASA engineer, just a few minutes ago, and they had a great chat and talked just about the way hands-on research can change a student's life, and that's what we're raising money for today. So right now, I am going to be introducing a special Lunch with a Scientist episode with Pfizer researcher Donna Luisi. Now, this was recorded a while ago, a couple of days ago, and it's really insightful. Obviously, Pfizer is in the news a lot right now with the COVID pandemic and the vaccine, and she talks about her experience working in the organization when it was just all hands on deck while they were developing the vaccine early on in the pandemic, her path into science research, and just about her career now and what it's like. And she has a great presentation on what she does now for Pfizer. So it's really insightful, and we hope you enjoy it. Before I hit play on this, I just want to remind everybody that you can visit our Big Day of Giving fundraising page at the website that's scrolling below to make a donation. We are raising money to make sure our important hands-on science education programs remain free for students in underserved communities, and for schools that otherwise couldn't be able to afford this type of great research that we're providing for students. So head over there and make a donation that you see fit, and continue on with us on our celebration of science today. So I'm going to introduce Donna Luisi now, and we hope you enjoy this special Big Day of Giving Lunch with a Scientist episode. Hey everyone, and welcome to another episode of Headwaters Science Institute's Lunch with a Scientist. Today we're here with Donna Luisi. She is an associate research fellow in the Pharmaceutical Research and Development Department at Pfizer. Dr. Luisi has 20 years industrial experience focusing on formulation, dosage, form design, and process development of various modalities, with an emphasis on biophysical characterization. So we're happy to have Dr. Luisi here with us, and I'm going to bring her in right now. And you can go ahead and just take it away with your presentation, and we'll go from there.
Perfect. Thank you, Dan. And I'd like to say thank you for inviting me. This is a lot of fun. And as you'll see from my presentation, I love getting engaged with high school and college and graduate students and trying to encourage more people to go into the sciences. So thank you for this opportunity.
Well, we're happy to have you here.
Thank you. So like Dan said, my name is Donna Luisi. I'm an associate research fellow in the Pharmaceutical Research Development at Pfizer. And I'd like to talk to you a little bit today about how I got here and then what I do. So I've always enjoyed math and science, always. And I was strongly encouraged to do this as a young person in my house, and especially by my dad, who even at that time, many, many years ago, felt there weren't enough women in the math and the science area. And even to this day, I mean, he was right. Even to this day, 30%, less than 30% of the world's researchers are women. So yes, I was strongly pushed in this area. And what are some of the things that I've done even at your age, right? In high school and in college? I was a math tutor in high school. So as a senior or junior, I mentored and tutored the freshmen and sophomores, math team in high school as well. As I moved on to my undergraduate studies and my graduate studies, I still loved tutoring. I still loved mentoring. And so as I moved on, I started mentoring and tutoring folks in chemistry. Once again, senior and junior year would mentor freshmen and sophomores, and I really enjoyed doing that. But I think really where my love of science started to kick in was as an undergraduate, when I started to do some undergraduate research. And I'll talk about that in a second as well. So what's my education? How did I get on this path? I have a BS in chemistry with a minor in math. After 4 years as an undergraduate, I realized math was fun, but it wasn't my strong suit. And so I went on and I got a PhD in chemistry. From there, I started my postdoctorate in biophysics and molecular biology. And I think with all of this background, it set me up really well for a job at Pfizer. And that's where I've been. And that's where I currently am as well. So my career has been entirely at Pfizer once I graduated. So what have I done? It's been many, many years of research, really exciting path. And I have to say, I'm hoping that many of you have a more pointed career, right? Whereas when I was an undergraduate student, I didn't know what area of science I really liked. I didn't know what kind of research I really liked, but I was in the chemistry department at that time, and I knew I wanted to have a female mentor. And so at that time, there was only a few female professors in our department. So being that naive freshman, I just found the female professor that would speak to me, went and knocked on her door, and I said, "Can I do undergraduate research in your lab?" She said yes. She took me in. She immediately found me a couple of graduate students in her lab that took me under their wing. And for the next 3 or so years, I did undergraduate research in her lab, and it was fantastic. And from that experience, those graduate students, that professor encouraged me to go on to graduate school. She felt to do what you want to do, you need to have a graduate degree. And so from there, I started my graduate research, and my graduate research was focused on protein folding. I love proteins. And so the rest of my research and the rest of my career has really been focusing on proteins. I went on and I did a postdoctorate and my research focus now is on proteins and disease states. And I think once I started realizing that some of this work I was doing could be tied back to human diseases, to ailments people had, to possibly understanding and possibly helping create a cure, I was hooked. And so that's when I decided, okay, I don't want to be a professor. I didn't like that work-life balance they had. And I wanted my research to be more focused on finding those cures, right? Developing those medicines to help people. I found a job at that time in Pfizer, right? And doing research in the pharmaceutical research and development group. So what do I do now? I'm not only a researcher, right? That sounds a little bit funny. I do many things. Since I've been there for 20 years now, I'm managing a large group of scientists and engineers, a very bright group of scientists and engineers. At any one time, there are about 8 to 10 people large. My group supports a number of programs, and you'll see in a couple of slides, Pfizer has a number of areas that we're interested in. So my group supports things like vaccines. COVID-19 is one of them. Sickle cell disease, dwarfism, bowel disease, respiratory disease, neutropenia, etc. The list goes on and on. What I've done in the past in my career here at Pfizer, I've also led a biophysical center of excellence. And this is where we had a group of about 20 or so biophysicists Pfizer-wide, where I led them in understanding and coming up with techniques, using instruments, figuring out problems by using biophysical techniques. And that was really exciting. And I enjoyed doing that for many years. Now my role has changed a little bit. And now I serve as a liaison. And I'm at that intersection of the clinical and the commercial teams, right? Clinical is very early on in development, and they're looking at what indications we should look at. Commercial is looking at, okay, do we have a program, a product that's marketable? And what I am doing is trying to bring them together so that we can make sure that we have the most well-rounded, best product that the patients need for this indication. And so that has been so much fun, being at the interface of that. Because of all the different teams that I'm on, and because of this very large group that I lead and all the wonderful work that they do, I have an opportunity to present my scientific work internally, meaning within Pfizer, and externally as well. So many conferences. But really throughout my career, as in education and then at Pfizer, I still love to mentor junior colleagues. And so I not only mentor the colleagues that are in my group, but I really enjoy mentoring the colleagues that are outside my group, still within Pfizer, but mentoring colleagues outside my group. A little bit about Pfizer. So I know you've probably heard of Pfizer in the news, right? They've been all over the news for the last 2 years now during the pandemic, and you may have heard of them before that as well, but you may not know about Pfizer's background. So Pfizer wasn't always this huge biopharmaceutical company. It actually started in 1849 by two cousins who were immigrants of Germany. One was a chemist, one was a confectioner. So a confectioner makes candies. So their very first drug was an anti-parasitic drug that was made to taste like toffee. So they were combining their both worlds, right? And I thought that was really quite interesting, to find that information out. Well, today Pfizer doesn't make just one drug. Pfizer has more than 350 different pharmaceuticals that are on the market, that are out there helping people, helping patients live longer, live better lives, stay healthier. And right now, Pfizer employs over 90,000 people worldwide, and we have sites in over 42 countries. So this really is one of the world's premier biopharmaceutical companies, and I really do enjoy working there. And this is an image of the first original little brick building that they had in Brooklyn. And I believe the building is still there, but it's no longer owned by Pfizer. So what are some of the areas of focus that Pfizer is focusing on, right? We have internal medicine, so extending lifespans worldwide. And so things here that we study are cardiovascular disease, for example. We also focus on inflammation and immunology. So these are molecular level treatments for things like arthritis and psoriasis, oncology, battling cancer. And that's a big one, right? I mean, I can't imagine anyone that's listening in on this whose family or friends have not been affected, who have not been touched by someone with cancer, whether it be breast, prostate, lung cancer. There's so many different types of cancer. And Pfizer really is doing, cutting edge research in this area. Rare disease, which fewer people may have insight into, right? Small populations, but huge impact. So things like hemophilia or sickle cell disease, where there's not as many medications or drugs on the market for some of these folks, Pfizer is in those areas. Vaccines, and this is an area that you've probably heard more about than maybe any of the other areas of focus that Pfizer has, preventing the spread of infections for things like meningitis and COVID-19. And COVID-19 will be the bulk of my talk, and we'll get into that in another slide or two. But one thing I did want to talk to this team a little bit about is some of the, I wanted to address some of the feedback that I hear all the time because I work for a company as large as Pfizer, right? Why do medicines take as long as they do to develop, and why does it cost so much money for some of these biopharmaceuticals or pharmaceutical compounds? Well, there's a good reason for it. Medicines that you are taking right now, medicines that your mom or dad or grandparents, or maybe you are taking at this very moment, probably took about 12 years to develop. So they started 12 years ago, right? And here's an image of our pipeline, or really the pipeline of any pharmaceutical or biopharmaceutical company. You have about 5,000 to 10,000 compounds in drug discovery at any one moment. And here the scientists are looking at target identification, right? Assay development. They're trying to figure out what are our lead candidates here. So that can take about 3 to 5 years. Once we have our lead candidate selected from drug discovery, they then move into preclinical trials. And these preclinical trials can be in vitro or in vivo studies, in animal studies. And here you're looking for some safety, a little bit of efficacy. This could take about 1 to 2 years. And from this pool of candidates, you narrow it down to about 5 compounds that move into human clinical trials. And you have phase 1, phase 2, and phase 3. And these different phases are in humans, and these trials get larger and larger as the phase goes on. And here you're collecting a lot more data on efficacy. You're collecting a lot more data on safety. You're honing in on your patient, what population you're looking at. And this could take approximately 6 to 7 years. Once the phase 1 through 3 clinical trials are done, you start looking at regulatory approval, and getting regulatory approval from places like the FDA or MAA in the UK and in Europe can take another 1 to 2 years. And so this whole process can take about 12 years or more, give or take a little bit. But Pfizer is trying to move faster. Along with many other companies, we are trying to move faster. And you can see this in the work that we're doing most recently. And so I know that everyone on this call has at least heard of the COVID-19 vaccine. Many of you have probably taken it. Many of your families have taken it as well. And so I wanted to give a little bit of background on what happened, what did Pfizer do, how our vaccine works, and a little bit of background on the whole process. In response to the coronavirus pandemic, Pfizer partnered with the small biotech company called BioNTech in Germany in April 2020. It began to develop the COVID-19 vaccine, and it would be an mRNA vaccine. In November 2020, Pfizer announced that data from the phase 3 clinical trial, so a really large clinical trial, had shown the vaccine was safe and effective with an efficacy of about 95%. And so you can see from the start of these studies, April 2020, to when we had very positive phase 3 results, was only a few months from April to November in the same year. So that was amazing. Pfizer was moving at lightning speed. It had taken almost all of its resources and put it all towards this one vaccine. It was amazing to see such a large company like Pfizer pause, shift gears, and move forward. By December 2020, Pfizer and BioNTech received the world's first temporary authorization in the UK. The vaccine became the first FDA-approved COVID-19 vaccine on August 23rd, 2021. So it was amazing to see so many scientists just pull together and push this through as quickly as they could. How does the virus make us sick? And I thought I wanted to throw all this information out there. A lot of this information is on the web. All of it is on the web, but not everyone may look into it or may know enough about it or may see what, little snippets on the news here and there. And so I thought I'd put together a short story just to, present it to the students here who are listening and who might be interested. So I think we all know how the coronavirus enters the body, right? It's through the nose, mouth, and eyes. And that's why for the last 2 years, many of us, if not all of us, have been wearing masks and have been social distancing and taking many, many precautions. I know I'm constantly asking my 3 young boys, wash your hands, constantly wash your hands. Once inside the body, once the virus enters your body, it goes into healthy cells, and it uses these healthy cells as machinery to then produce or replicate the coronavirus. So within your healthy cells, it then replicates, duplicates, makes so many copies of the virus. Once the cell is completely full of this virus, it basically explodes, right? It breaks open. It causes the cell to die, and this virus then spreads throughout your body and infects more cells. So with this being said, what is the coronavirus and what is the vaccine? So I wanted to dig a little bit deeper. I mentioned earlier on that the vaccine that we chose to manufacture and make is a messenger RNA vaccine, an mRNA vaccine. But in order to understand what an mRNA vaccine is, you need to first start off with what is the difference between DNA and RNA. This is something that many of you are probably very familiar with it in school, right? DNA has a double, right? 2 backbone strands, double helix. RNA is a single strand. DNA functions to encode, store, and replicate genetic information, where RNA takes that genetic information and then from DNA and then converts that into proteins, right? Makes amino acids. Those amino acids then fold into proteins. So if we dig a little deeper, right, what is the flow? You go from DNA, transcription, RNA, translation. You have this amino acid change and the amino acid chain, and then you fold into a nicely folded protein. So transcription, and this is just as a refresher, you're probably all aware of this, right? Transcription is the process by which the information in a strand of DNA is copied into a new molecule of messenger RNA. Right? Translation is the process by which a cell makes proteins using this genetic information. So if we look at the coronavirus, which is technically called the SARS-CoV-2, right? Severe acute respiratory syndrome coronavirus 2. That's a mouthful. So we'll just call it the COVID-19 virus. You can see that within this virus, right, you have the single-stranded RNA enveloped in the virus. You can see on the surface of this virus, there's what's called a spike protein. So the major surface structure on this virus is what's called a spike protein. This spike protein allows this virus to penetrate host cells, which causes the infection. So right away, BioNTech and Pfizer said this spike protein might be a great target, an optimal target for the COVID-19 vaccine. Excuse me one second. So what did Pfizer, and really what did Pfizer and BioNTech do? I should really preface that by saying, what did Pfizer and BioNTech do? The first thing they did was get a hold of some of the virus, right? They then extracted some of the RNA out of the virus, looked at this RNA, found out which piece coded for this spike protein that's on the surface of the virus. They isolated the mRNA, and they used this as part of the mRNA in the COVID-19 vaccine. So if you look at the vaccine, you have that little piece of messenger RNA that codes for the spike protein. Pfizer and BioNTech decided to surround that by lipid nanoparticles. So why a lipid nanoparticle? Well, lipid nanoparticle had two main functions in this situation. It protected the messenger RNA from being degraded and destroyed. Remember, we had to get it into the body, right? We had to get it into the body so it could do what it needed to do. This also, the LNPs also facilitate cellular uptake of the messenger RNA. So you have to get it into the cells as well. How did this work? So going over the vaccine's mechanism and action of immune response. Mechanism of action and immune response, sorry. mRNA vaccine is injected intramuscularly. As many of you probably remember, it was a 2-dose series, right? You got a shot in your arm. LNPs around the mRNA allow the vaccine to enter the cells. And like we talked about before, it then uses the cell's machineries to replicate. So now we're using the cell's machinery to replicate the messenger RNA. And so that cell's machinery is the ribosome. And so once this happens, the injected messenger RNA begins to degrade, and your body starts to produce this messenger RNA. The spike proteins are then made, right? They're released from the cell, and they immediately initiate an immune response. That immune response grows in time, and so the cellular immune response now can be generated to respond to future SARS-CoV-2 infections. And this COVID-19 vaccine helps our body to develop immunity to the virus that causes COVID-19 without us having to get sick. So what was the end result? The end result was these nice little vials that took about less than a year to develop, and we had this COVID-19 vaccine, which we're all incredibly proud of. Talking about that, though, I know this team of students who's listening in, they're not just interested in what that COVID-19 vaccine was, but you guys are all interested in science in general. And so what are some of the things that scientists do at biopharmaceutical companies? There's so many areas that scientists can go down, and the route that I took was going into a biopharmaceutical company. And so what are the things that you can do here? Well, if you're at a biopharmaceutical company, they are so large, our scientists specialize. So many different scientists specialize in so many different areas. Some of the things that they may specialize in, and I'll list them here and on the next slide as well, is designing new drug therapies. We also have scientists who uncover new ways to use existing drugs to treat different types of disease. And so this can be very handy at times as well. Study how disease affects the body and what causes some people to develop certain types of disease. They study how the human body responds to medications. And this is really to develop better and safer drugs. And so as years go on, when you look at drugs that maybe were manufactured 20, 30 years ago, drugs now are much safer, more efficacious, more directed to the target. And this takes development, and this takes very bright scientists to figure this out over time. Some of us do test drugs on animals and humans, and this is to ensure safety and efficacy, and this has to be done. What are some of the other things that they do? They determine the most effective formulation and dosage form for a specific drug. They need to make sure that the drug is stable. So you can't have something that you manufacture and within one day it starts to fall apart and degrade. It won't be beneficial to the patients that we're trying to serve, to the people that we're trying to serve. We have scientists who are manufacturing scientists, and they work on improving the drug manufacturing process. And so how do you take something that was in the lab and, the small scale where you can make a couple of milligrams, and now you're asking folks to scale up, and now I need thousands of liters, right? That takes a manufacturing scientist to scale up and improve that process. We have other scientists that ensure the consistent quality of prescription medications. This is key as well. There's also some scientists who advise government agencies like the FDA on issues related to biopharmaceuticals. But really, regardless of where they choose to specialize in the drug development process, these scientists have the satisfaction of spending their time looking for ways to help people fight disease and stay healthy. And that's really why I find working at Pfizer and working at a large pharmaceutical company so exciting, especially when you get to talk to those patients, or you get to talk to parents of patients whose children are taking the medications that you helped develop. It's wonderful to see people improving their lives, especially kids and adults and elderly, and they're living longer and healthier lives. And you know that you had a tiny, tiny little part to play in that. And at the end of the day, I also want to thank Megan and Jennifer for, talking to me about this, coaching me through this, and then just getting me involved in Headwater Science Institute. I think the work that you do is fantastic. And I know you're touching the lives of many young scientists. And I wish I had something like this 20, 30 years ago when I was thinking about this. But thank you so much for this opportunity. And I wish you all the best of luck.
Well, thanks, Donna, for that great presentation. I'm sure our audience will find it very interesting and useful. I just had a couple of follow-up questions, if you don't mind, just to talk about your research a little bit more. Mm-hmm. And just your overall path into this. So what challenges did you face, especially early on when you were getting started with going into your path, and how that affected to where you are today?
Yeah. Dan, that's a really good question, because I have to say that, the majority of my friends went to college, right? But right outside of college, all of them, the bulk of them got jobs, right? And so they were all making good money. They were all working. They were leading 9-to-5 lives, right? The way I saw it, they were starting their lives, right? They were moving forward. And at that time, I decided to, right after my undergraduate, go into graduate school. So I was making very, very little money, right? Barely enough to survive, working 14, 18-hour days, 6-7 days a week, because I wanted to get my PhD, right? It was a passion. But I definitely felt that I was leading a different life from the bulk of my friends who didn't really understand why I was doing what I was doing, right? And it was a passion. It wasn't just about the money, but it was about my love of science. And so I think that was one of my biggest challenges in the beginning, was just breaking away from friends, not losing friends, but breaking away and having a different life path, having a different life goal. But I think I definitely benefit from it. And I'm happy that I did what I did.
What kept you going just on the day-to-day? I know you mentioned your passion. Obviously, that's one thing, but what are some of the other things that kept you motivated towards that end goal?
I have to say, and for any of the students that are watching, that if they decide to go on into undergraduate in science or a graduate degree in science, finding the right lab, finding the right people around you. When you're in a lab for 3 years like an undergraduate, or for 4 or 5 years like a graduate student, I found really good labs, really good people who were so motivated and happy to be doing what they were doing. When you're spending 14, 16-hour days in a lab, You want to be spending it with people that you enjoy. You want to be spending it with, doing science that you love. And I think that really helped. And so my social network started to change from college and beyond. It became those people who were in the lab with me. And some of those same people, when I was pulling an all-nighter, running some experiments, some of those same people would show up at 2 a.m. going, I knew you had an all-nighter, want to just chat for an hour or two while, in between your experiments. And we would do that for each other. And I think we just kept each other motivated. And that was a wonderful experience. And, I think anyone, find the right lab is the big thing. Find the research that you enjoy doing and find the right lab that you enjoy the people, you enjoy your advisor, and you enjoy your lab mates. That's critical.
That makes a lot of sense. Well, obviously, Pfizer and with COVID-19 and everything has been just, everywhere. It's been a life-changing aspect of all of our lives. When you first got into this, did you envision being part of such, life-changing work when you first started?
Not this big, and that's a really another good question. I got into being at a biopharmaceutical company because I wanted to help, right? I wanted to be part of these cures. But like I said, in the middle of my slide deck, it could take 12 years. And before COVID came along, I would work on a program and maybe 7-8 years later, we'd start seeing, oh my goodness, it's, patients are benefiting from this. It's moving into phase 3. Oh, it might go commercial. This is exciting. And when the pandemic started and Pfizer right away said, we have to do something about this, right? We have the resources, we have the woman and manpower to do something about this. That was really exciting to see Pfizer pivot. And, I was involved in the process and the folks on my team were involved in the process. And talk about feeling like you were back in graduate school. So many of the Pfizer colleagues were putting in 6-7 days a week, working 12, 14, 16, 18-hour days. And that's really why they were able to take, part of the reason why, right? Part of the reason why they were able to take this timeline that typically takes 10 to 12 years and really pare it down to a year. Don't get me wrong. There was a lot of other things that went into it. The world realized that we were in a pandemic mode and they needed to help us push forward this process. But all of Pfizer's scientists, all of its colleagues had one purpose at that point, right? And there were a lot of other programs that were sort of halted and put on hold while Pfizer could focus on this one problem. It was stressful. It was very wonderful to see all the colleagues come together. Would I want to do that again? No, I felt like I lost a year of my life, but they did it and it was amazing to see. So yeah, that was fun.
Yeah, I can imagine. I'm sure the days there at the office or wherever you were, working from home or wherever were pretty crazy. Well,
yes.
What was a typical day like during the intense part of it?
So for me, I'm not in the lab anymore. And so all the folks that are on my team are in the lab. And so I was remote. So I was working from home because Pfizer wanted to only have the lab essential personnel on site, right? Because they were trying to limit, close contact with too many people. And so everyone who was outside of the lab was working from home while the folks in the lab were on site. And so I was working from home. For the first year, my 3 boys were remote learning as well. So they were in the house with me. And, those nights where it was 7, 8, 9, 10 o'clock at night and they, saw mommy still online. They would come to me with a cup of tea. They'd bring me a blanket to cover me, at night. And they're like, okay, good night, mom. And they would go to bed and I'd still be online working. But it was intense, but it was an exciting time. Being in on meetings and you knew everyone else was online also. So if you had a question at 10 o'clock at night, there were 20 other people that you could ask and they were online as well, right? They tucked their kids to bed and they got back online. It was amazing to see. A lot of people put their lives on pause for this. Pfizer responded exactly how they should have. It was amazing to see. I think one of the worries that I have is the world going to expect all of our new medicines to go as quickly as this one did? And there's no way that they can, right? But in some instances, the nice thing is that we know if we had to, we could, right? We hope we don't have to. And things are moving faster. We've learned a lot. We've learned a lot of lessons from this pandemic. We've learned a lot from making this COVID-19 vaccine, and we are getting faster. I don't think our whole pipeline will be less than a year from concept to, manufacture and having a vial in hand, but timelines will be shortened. They definitely will. We learned a lot.
Well, what an amazing experience to be a part of. And, I thank you again for joining us. It was really insightful and valuable to hear your experience. And, if anybody else wants to get more involved in science research and hands-on research, Headwaters Science Institute offers our summer research experience, and we actually have spots open for it now. So you can visit that link below and check it out. It really is it's a great opportunity for high school students to really up their game on the science research level and get hands-on experience and work with actual professional scientists. So check that out. And thanks again. I really appreciate it, Donna. And join us again for another episode of Lunch with a Scientist in a couple weeks. And don't forget to subscribe and hit that notification bell so you never miss an episode. And thanks again, everybody. See you all next time.
Thank you.